Hi, this is Sweet June. How's everybody doing today? Coming back at you with another interesting video topic. I hope everybody's day is going good. Um, like I say, springtime is coming. It's getting nicer and nicer up here. Um, I'm loving it. I can't wait. I want to talk about. I don't do too many current event type things. I mean, unless something really piques my interest. Um, this story that I seen a couple of people here on YouTube covered this. Kind of really piqued my curiosity. Elder Rashonda Lay, he talked about it, and um, the Trey King show, he's talking about it, and it's about this North Carolina daycare worker that attacked, body slammed. They say she's choking and body slamming a 4-year-old. I was looking at the video and that story kind of piqued my curiosity, kind of piqued my interest because, as I've said before, I used to work in a daycare. And it's interesting because um, they said that she did only got charged with a misdemeanor and she didn't get that much time. Um, I know why that is, but I'm not going into that. I want to address that. I looked at that and, both Elder and Trey King addressed this, and I said, I think I'm going to talk about that. Um, she apparently body slammed the 4-year-old child. They got her on video. The daycare had video cameras, and I guess she got um, another daycare teacher recorded her doing this to the child, and apparently she was body slamming the child. Um, she was body slamming this child. Um, he says that she choked and body slammed this 4-year-old child. So just imagine if you have your child in a daycare center. You a parent and you have to work. You don't have any family members that can care for your child. You don't have someone that you can trust, that you can trust to care for your child. And you're left with no other choice but to place your child into a daycare center. Now, you thought that you done checked this place out thoroughly before you made your decision. And you thought that this daycare was pretty good and everything. You thoroughly checked it out. You placed your child, you entrusted your most precious asset, your child, with these strangers. Because you thought, that this daycare is one of the best. So you would like to think, right? And just imagine something like this happening to your child. You at work, you a parent, you gotta work, you gotta make them coins to provide for your child, and you put your child in this daycare center, assuming a parent puts their child in the daycare center. They assume, they would like to assume, and they would like to think that their child is going to be in good hands. They also have the expectation that these people that are caring for their children like children. They even love children. They enjoy working with children. Okay? That's what every parent putting their child into a daycare center would like to think. That's what you would like to think. That these people that are working in this daycare, they have a passion for working with children. They love children. Um, they care for children. So you would like to think. Well, I used to work in a daycare, and I'm sorry to tell you that that's not always the case. People that work in daycares do not not all people that work in daycares actually really love children. You know, they may like children, but it's the difference between you can love children, but or you can like children, but that doesn't mean that you can tolerate working with them. You can love them in the aspect of if you see a cute little kid at the daycare or at the grocery store, you're like, oh, it's so cute, oh, and then you go about your business. Or you might love them in the aspect of your children or children in your own family or children that you have a close relationship with. You may love those children, but it's a difference between loving children that's in close association with you than versus loving children that you practically don't know um, in a daycare like setting. There's a huge difference because I'm here to tell you that not everybody that works with children loves children. And there's different reasons why these people are working in these daycares. This is the reason why this particular story kind of piqued my interest because I used to work in a daycare. So so I said, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and address that. I'm gonna talk about that because um, I'm gonna state some of the reasons why people are working in daycares, and I'm gonna also state some of the reason why. And I noticed that that's a common theme. I'm seeing a lot of stories. I've seen stories in the news of people abusing children, neglecting children in daycares, and a lot of stories here on YouTube. And so I'm gonna tell you some reasons why some of these things are happening in daycares. And first of all, I'm gonna talk about the reasons why some of these people are working in daycares. First of all, um, right off the bat, the pay is not good. The pay in daycare centers is just not good. Uh, that's they CBS News. CBS News a couple years back did a CBS morning special. They did a clip on a story on how underpaid daycare teachers are, and it's one of the lowest paying fields out there. If you get a degree in early childhood education, you better make sure you really, really have a passion for it. I mean, you have to really, really have a passion for working with children to actually get a degree. Because even if you get a degree, you go get an education and you get a degree, you're not going to make a whole lot of money. I'm gonna keep it 100. It is not a high paying field. It's actually one of the lowest paid professional, and it is a professional field. It's not like you going to work at McDonald's or Burger King. It is literally a professional field. Working with children is a professional field. I had to get certified when I worked at this daycare. I had to get a certification. I had to get a CDA, which is a early childhood. What does that stand for? Early child care credential. It's like a child. It's called. I think it's Child Development Associate. I think that's what CDA stands for. It's like a certification. It's like if you're working with people at a nursing home. If you're an aide working at a nursing home, you have you're a certified nurse's aide. But you work in childcare. And that was one of the requirements to work at this daycare was to get CDA qualified. And so me and amongst some of my other colleagues got a certification. We got a CDA credential from the state of Michigan. Our mine is expired because I think they're only good for like 4 years, 3 years. They're only good for like 3 years. After 3 years, you have to renew it. So this is a professional field. Being an early working in the daycare, being an early childhood teacher educator is a professional field. It is not just a job. It is not just a job. It is actually a professional field. People get associate's degrees, they get bachelor's degrees to work in this field. But even when you get a degree, you are not going to make a whole lot of money. It's not a high paying field. You're not going to make a whole lot of money. So that's the first thing right off the bat. They don't make a whole lot of money. And because they don't make a whole lot of money, the turnover rate is bad. They have a huge turnover. This special on CBS this morning a couple of years ago, they were talking about that. It was this daycare in New York, and the parents were very concerned about the high turnover rate. And they was talking about some of the reasons why there was such a high turnover rate, and low paying was number one on the list. That is the reason why it's a high turnover rate. It's a very low paying field. You don't make a whole lot of money. People get into it and they realize they're not making a lot of money. And it's with everything that you have to put up with all the things that you have to deal with working with children, all the challenges, because there are a lot of challenges. That people realize that the pay is not parallel to the things that you have to deal with as a daycare teacher. So a lot of people get out of the field, amongst myself and a lot of other people get out of the field because it's not a high paying field. And with all the things that you have to deal with, it's a highly stressful. And they also talked about that. It's very, very stressful. It's a very stressful job. Working with children is a very stressful job. It is very stressful because especially when you're dealing with children that have challenging, what they like the term as challenging behavior. You in some a lot of daycares do not do a good job with training, giving their staff the proper training to deal with children that have challenging behaviors. If they don't have the proper training to deal with these different behaviors, they're not going to know how to deal with it. And in children, it depends on I probably can do 2 or 3 videos is talking about that. Different behaviors. Every child is different. You got to consider their home life. It's a whole lot of factors involved in that. Their parents, their home life, what's going on with them at home. It's all kind of factors is considered. It will be, because I know we had one child at this daycare I worked at. We had one child that came from a family that he was in a foster care type situation, and his biological family, the father was teaching him how to fight and stuff, and so the child was very combative. So you have to understand that being a daycare teacher, you have to understand that from jump. So you have to know how to deal with this child accordingly. And dealing with this child was very challenging. Very, oh my God. I'm not going to go into everything, but it was very, very challenging dealing with this child. And if you was a teacher and you don't have patience and you had an anger issue, you could not work with this child. And that's another thing. They're hiring people to work in this field that don't have any experience working with kids, or they have very little experience working with children, or they just was a babysitter, which, it's not really that, that's really not the same thing, because when you're babysitting, you're probably babysitting family members or close people that you know that's in close association with you. You're dealing with a lot of people that have never worked in a early child care setting or daycare setting before. It's an very, very easy field to get into. Probably too easy to get into. And because of that, it's such a high turnover rate. So the directors are hiring these people out of desperation because they need staff. They need staff. So they're hiring these people, and these people do not have the temperament. Some of these people do not have the temperament to work with children. They don't have the temperament. If you have anger issues, you cannot work with children under any circumstances. You cannot work with children if you have anger issues. If you have an anger problem, you cannot work with children or the elderly. You can't work in a caregiving type situation, period, if you have an anger problem. You just can't do it. Even working with the elderly, you can have anger problems because sometimes if the elderly people are dealing with dementia, they get what my director likes to call the fight the the fight and flight um, thing going on in their head to where they want to fight you. Okay, they get combative. You got to be slow to anger. The elderly people is a little bit more understanding because you know that that's their dementia. That they don't mean to be that way, but it's their dementia. It's more understanding. Children, they know what they're doing. Okay, a 3 or 4 year old knows what they're doing. They know what they're doing. If they being combative, they know what they're doing. Trust me, they're smart at that age. Very smart, more smart than what people give them credit for. So that's the difference. And so you, as a teacher, you got to have self-control. This job, when I worked at this daycare, I was telling one of my coworkers the other day, when I worked at the daycare, it really taught me anger management. I really learned because I used to have I used to be very quick tempered years ago. I used to be quick to anger. I used to be kind of quick tempered. But this job really taught me anger management. When I worked with these children, it really taught me how to manage my anger. I really learned anger management and I really learned to be slow to anger. I really learned to be, because you have to be working with children, you have to be slow to anger. You have to be slow to anger. You have to, you can't have issues. You have to be patient. You have to have the patience of Job, as they say. You have to have the patience of Job. You have to have a lot of patience working with kids. And they're hiring some of these people that don't have any patience. They have no business working with children. They don't have any patience. They have an anger problem. When the challenging behaviors come up, and you're going to have a lot of them when you're working with 1, 2, 3, and 4 year olds, you're gonna have some challenges. You're gonna have some behaviors. They like to call it challenging behavior. You're gonna have some behaviors. Trust and believe. I didn't know everything that I was gonna have to deal with when I took the job. When I first took the job, I didn't know. I was overconfident when I first took the job at this daycare. I was like, oh, piece of cake. I you know, this is gonna be a piece of the cake. This job gonna be so easy. I was in for a rude awakening. I found out it wasn't as easy as I thought it was. It turned out to be very challenging for me because first of all, I had no. Well, I volunteered at a daycare when I was 14 years old years ago, but it was a whole different setup. It was a whole different. It was a small daycare center. It was a whole different setup. It wasn't the same setup. I had no idea what I was getting myself into when I took this job. I thought it was, it's going to be a piece of cake. I was overconfident. And I got in there, boy, I was in for a rude awakening. It was so challenging. That job was challenging from day one. It was very challenging. I started out in the 2-year-old classroom, and it was very challenging. Um, the teachers thought I was an idiot at first because I had no idea. I was stressed, and I'm the type of person, I don't work well under pressure. And this job, this daycare, they just kind of throw you in the classroom. They give you a little orientation, little minor orientation, and they just kind of throw you into the classroom. And so you just kind of learn. You kind of have to learn as you go, type situation. And so, needless to say, to make a long story short, the teachers at work I worked with at the time thought I was a total idiot, and they didn't have any patience with me. I don't work well under pressure. I really don't. And so, but you have to, as time went on and more time I worked through trial and error, making a lot of mistakes, I learned to get really good at the job. But it was very, very, all the way up until the time I quit, it was very, very challenging. At that time, I was so stressed out. I was so stressed out. I was more stressed out than what I realized I was. Um, this working in childcare, you have to have a lot of patience. Needless to say, you have to have a lot of patience. And the problem is the pay is not good. And because the pay is not good, they have a high turnover rate. And they're hiring these people off the streets that don't, most of the time, don't have any former early child care experience. And they're coming into the interview saying, "Oh, I have my own children. Yeah, I used to babysit." Don't count. "Oh, I love children." That's the typical statement. Just because you love children does not mean that you can work with them. Loving children could mean, oh, you see a cute little child at the store. "Oh, isn't it cute? Oh," or your friend brings over her new baby. "Oh," and you babysit for them, and oh, and you get to send a child home. That's not the same thing. It is. People think it is. It's not. It's not the same thing. Unless you have actually worked in a early child care setting. And we had to teach the children. um it's not you're what people like to call it glorified babysitting, but you're not just babysitting. It's a lot more. It's you. We had to teach the children. We had to do lesson plans. It was like you literally being a teacher. You had to do lesson. We had to do lesson plans. We had to teach the children, read to the children. We had to play with them, interact with them. It was a certain way that we had to talk to them. You can't just be talking to them any kind of way. It was a certain things that we had to say to them. It was a certain way that when we were having behaviors, it was a certain way that we had to address it. Okay? There was a certain way that we had to talk to the child when they were having behaviors and things like that. Yes. It's a we had to ask open-ended questions and things like that. I had learned so much on this job that and I had to cultivate that. I didn't just walk in the door knowing how to do all that. You don't become a good early child care teacher overnight. It's not an overnight thing. It's a process. And it's a continual learning process, because we had to keep taking these classes that we had to take at home. And it's a continual learning process. The learning doesn't stop. And if you are a teacher and you don't have patience, that's why it's really disturbing. I keep reading stories like this, because I'm thinking in my mind, used to be a daycare teacher, of so many ways that she could have addressed that to where it didn't have to escalate like that. Because children do get combative. They get combative. Oh, I got some stories to tell. They kick, they hit, they bite, they run from you, and sometimes they run from you at the wrong time. If you got them outside, if I'm closing the classroom, because a lot of times I was a closer, if I'm closing the classroom and I got kids out on the playground and I got to get 3 or 4 kids in off the playground, and I got the other 3 kids at the gate, and I got one child out there that's refusing to come in. He's running around the playground refusing to come in. Well, I got to think of some creative strategies to get that child in. Okay, and I learned to basically what I learned, me personally, what I learned to do is I learned to use reverse psychology on the kids. And I learned to use the reverse psychology on them, and a lot of times that worked. In a lot of cases, not in all cases, but sometimes it worked. I learned to do that when I was working at this daycare. And so situations like that, sometimes you're out walking them down the street and you get a child. Toddlers fall out. They have meltdowns. They fall out on the ground and refuse to get up. Well, if you got like 15 kids that you're trying to walk down the street on a string, on a rope, and you got this one child falling out, laying on the ground, refusing to get up, you got to have some creative strategies of how you're going to get that child off the ground in public. Because if you're walking them down a busy street, you got cars going by. And If you do anything out of pocket, yeah, and there were cases when I was working at this daycare where people seen things with the teachers walking the kids down the street, and they called the daycare. Yes, and they reported the teacher to the daycare when they what they it wasn't. Turns out that it wasn't what they thought they seen. Okay, so you have to be very strategic, and you in a public place, and you got these kids on the road, and you have one child that has a meltdown and falls out. You have to be very strategic in how you get that child up off the ground without resorting to, you can't be pulling on the yanking on the child, because if someone sees that and they know what daycare you at, that could be your job, and you can even go to jail. Okay, so it's deep. It's deep. The liability is deep in this job. So you have to be very, very strategic of how you get that child off the ground. Okay, how do you keep this children calm? A lot of times, I would when we had children that their their temperament was that they would easily they would get upset easily, and you know, I learned to talk to them in a calm voice to calm them down. You know, get down to their level. We were taught all that, you know, to get down to their level. Speak to them in a calm voice. And some cases that works, some cases it don't. When you in the classroom, sometimes if they fall out, sometimes the best thing to do is just leave them alone. Just let them, you know, work it out. Eventually they'll calm down, and you could proceed on with the other kids and doing what you were doing with the other kids. And then once they realize that the spotlight is not going to be on them, they get up and they come and join the other children. So you got to be, but if you're walking them down the street and this happens, well, you're on a schedule, and you got to get to wherever it is that you're going in a certain amount of time and get them back to the daycare at a certain amount of time. So you ain't got time to be waiting on this child to get up off the ground. So you got to be very strategic on how you get this child up without having the public think that you're beating the crap out of the kid, you know. So it's a lot that goes into this job, and a lot of daycare centers do not do a good job of training their staff. They don't do a good job at training their staff and teaching their staff how to deal with these challenging behaviors, because with each child it's different. Every child, every last one of them kids coming into the daycare, they have a different temperament. And you have to learn that child. You have to learn that child's triggers. You have to learn that child's triggers. You have to learn what works for that particular child. Oh, yeah, you got to be a little bit of a child psychologist to work in this field. Literally. You got to be a little bit of a child psychology. Because I had to learn, like when I was working in the 3-year-old classroom, I had to learn each and every one of these kids. And I had to learn what their triggers were. I had to learn what worked for this particular child. What strategies that I could do to get this child to do what I need them to do. We wasn't, this daycare I worked at, we were not allowed to yell at the children. We were not allowed to raise our voice. You know, some teachers did, but we were not allowed to raise our voice to the children. Yelling was a no-no. And it was a certain procedure. It was a certain way that you had to talk to the kids. And I learned in my own mind, you know, I'm the type of person, when I'm doing a job, if there's a more efficient way to do that job, I'm gonna figure it out. That's just me. That's just how I am. If I'm gonna figure out a more efficient way or easier way to do a job, if I can figure it out, I'm going to try to figure it out. And so I learned, like I said, I learned how to use a lot of reverse psychology, because a lot of times I used to close the classroom, and the kids, you know, would start wilding out and stuff like that. A lot of times I would be like, we would have certain special toys in our closet that we didn't have out in the classroom, and we only pulled them out at certain times. So I would tell the children, you know, I knew they loved to get them toys out of that closet. So I tell them, I said, okay, well, very calmly, I guess you're not going to get any of my toys in the closet because you're not doing your job. And they'd be like, oh, okay, all right. Next thing you know, they come into the carpet and everything like that. And I'm getting them to do what I need them to do, you know? So I'm not saying that was foolproof and it worked all the time. It didn't work all the time. Sometimes they would ignore me or whatever, you know? But it did work a lot of times. So, I mean, you got to find out what the child's triggers are, what works for that particular child. If a child likes to play with a specific toy or they like to do a specific activity, you say, okay, well, you're not going to do this activity or play with this toy until I see you doing your job. If I see you doing your job, then you may have this toy or do this particular activity. And a lot of times it works, you know? It's positive reinforcement. And so that's the type of stuff that teaches the types of tools that we're taught in working with children. And a lot of daycares don't do a good job of teaching their teachers. They are training their teachers. I know when I worked at this daycare, we had extensive training. We had to do a lot of training at home on the computer, which I didn't like it. It was good information, but I didn't like doing all that training on my own time. But we had to do it. We had to have meetings. All kind of it was a constant learning process, constant extensive training. And daycare centers are not, I don't think, in my opinion, they're not doing a good job because they got such a high turnover rate. They got so many people coming and going. They really don't have time to sit and do all this extensive training. By the time you get somebody halfway trained, they out the door. Now you got another one you got to worry about. And they kind of just throw you into the classroom. I got thrown into the classroom, you know, and it's kind of a learn as you go type situation. And so at first it was just so stressful. When I first started working at this daycare, I was so stressed out. I mean, I cut my own hours. I told them I can't come in the mornings. The mornings was so stressful to me. The teachers was getting on my nerves. They thought I was a complete idiot. Oh my God. It was so stressful. It used to be so stressful for me working the mornings at this daycare. Uh, I was just so stressed out. I said, I can't come in till 12 o'clock. I can't come in till 12 because I was the closer in this classroom. So I was like, I can't come in till 12. I come in at nap time when the kids are taking a nap. How about that? But then I had to deal with some things when I was closing the classroom. I had to deal with some stuff then, because if you're closing the classroom and you're down to 4 kids, the ratio in the 2-year-old classroom was for every one teacher there was 4 kids. So if I had another teacher working with me, well, after we got down to 4 kids, that other teacher is skating. She's out the door. Okay, I got my 4 kids that I got left while I'm trying to close the classroom. So I had to deal with some issues there, you know? Plus, it didn't help matters with the lead teacher being nitpicky and critiquing every little thing that, when I came in the next morning, I found a toy on the floor, you know? So that didn't help the situation. The lead teacher was riding me. She was riding my back. And then at the same time, I had to learn how to deal with these kids. Man, I tell you, that was the most challenging job that I had ever had in my life. But at the same time, it taught me a lot. I learned a lot from this job. I learned anger management. I learned good temperament. I learned how to be slow to anger. I learned patience. And those are the prerequisites to working with children. These children are people's most precious assets. Your child is your most precious asset. Just imagine you taking your child to this daycare. You got to go to work. You thinking that you'd like to believe that you done checked the place out. And so it seemed like a pretty good, because sometimes they like to put on the front when you go visit the daycare. and they're walking the parent through the daycare visiting. Sometimes they like the front. They, put on the front. And us teachers knew the cue. We knew the cue when a parent was being brought through on a tour. We knew the cue when they brought the teacher in. Hi, how you doing? Yeah. So we, teachers put on a big front. They put on a big front. But I recommend you guys watching this video, check out my daycare tips video. You got to scroll down and look a little bit ways, since I did it a while back. Check out my daycare tips video. Very useful information in that video. I recommend, if you have your child in a daycare center, pop up. I think that was one of the things I didn't emphasize in that video. Pop up at random times. Because when you're visiting, you're checking out the daycare and you're visiting, and they know you coming, they gon', okay, that doesn't work. You need to pop up. When you first dropping off the child, the teachers are gonna be on their up and up. Okay? We all had that down pat. The best thing to do is to pop up. Ask your boss, can you get off work early, a couple of hours early? Okay? Go on your lunch break. Just pop up. Just pop up. Don't even let the daycare. Most daycares have an open door policy. They should. If they don't have an open door policy, you don't need to have your child there. If you can't just pop up on your child, you just can't come into, most daycare centers have an open door policy where the parents can pop up and, check in on their child. You should be able to do that. If you can't do that, then that's a problem. Okay? So I highly recommend, as a parent that have your child in the daycare, pop up at random times. Teachers don't know when you're coming. That's when you'll see what's really going on in your classroom, your child's classroom. That's when you'll be able to find out what's really going on. If you pop up, you will be surprised. Okay? Then if you pop up and you see some things that you're not happy with, then you can go to the director and you can address it. That's how you do that. Or make the choice of pulling your child out. Whatever the situation is, or the severity of the situation. I mean, if you walk in and that teacher is yanking on your child or beating your child or whatever the situation is, that I know I always made it a practice of especially because I was, like I said, I was a closer a lot. So I knew I knew that at that point, parents could walk in at any given time. So I always made sure that I was not caught, that the parents, if they were walking in, that they were going to be walking into a positive type situation, of me interacting with the children in as positive manner as I possibly could have it. Okay. So they're not walking into a situation to where, because I didn't do a lot of that stuff. I didn't hit any kids or all that. I was scared. I was terrified to do it. I was scared to do any of that stuff. I mean, ethically, I wouldn't have done it anyway. I wouldn't have done it anyway because I don't do that, But if you get caught abusing the child, you can go to jail. So, most people should have a normal level of fear, with that. But I didn't do that anyway. I'm not that type of person to be beating on somebody's kids. Okay. But you do get challenging behaviors with children, and it does test you. It tests you. There's times where I had to walk out of the classroom. If the other teachers in the classroom, I had to walk away and ask the other teachers to deal with the situation. Yes. And so if you feel yourself getting angry as a teacher, that's what you got to do. You got to walk away, say, I got to take a couple of minutes, get myself together. I mean, that's what you got to do. So, I mean, that's what teachers got to learn how to do. So that's why I had to address this situation, because, it was this this particular story kind of piqued my curiosity because, like I said, I used to work in daycare, so a daycare. So yeah, that's some of the reasons why they hire those people. You know, like these people are working in daycares. Anyway, let me know in the comment section what you think. Is the lady out of North Carolina daycare worker was caught choking and slamming a 4-year-old child. If you, like I said, I don't know how to put the clips on here. I'll try to put the video link in the description box. But if not, go to the Trey King show, um, his channel, or the Elder Rashawn. He's talking about it, but he's just talking about it for a few minutes. But if you want to get the more of a full story, go to the Trey King show. He's going in more detail talking about it. But yeah, I had to address that. So if you guys let me know in the comment section what you think, and like, and please subscribe to my channel. I got some more interesting video topics coming up. This is Sweet June.